Hi there, you're listening to the Bigfoot Society podcast, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Every week I talk to individuals who have experienced Sasquatch in some way or another, so you won't want to miss an episode. Make sure you're subscribed on the platform that you're listening to, and share this episode with a friend. It does not cost a thing, and it helps the show continue to grow. If you'd like to hear Bigfoot Society episodes early and ad-free, you can do so by becoming a Patreon supporter or a YouTube channel member. Links to those are in the show notes. In Bigfoot Society, I've taken far too much of your time so far, so let's get on with the show. Thank you for reaching out. I'm really interested in this area. I always have this on my radar. And so when you approached me about it, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. So yeah, I'd love to hear what happened to you guys.
Yeah. And I gotta apologize too. I'm not so nervous to speak to you in, this general sense of, possibly being on the podcast or whatever it may be, but this happened on the 17th, so just Thursday. So I think, I don't know, I might have to take a couple deep breaths every once in a while just because it happened so recently. So I'll just apologize now for that. So, yeah. My friend and I, who this happened to, we get out all the time, mostly in Iowa, but sometimes in some surrounding states. And we go arrowhead hunting, and we look for agates and geodes and things like that. And I go fishing quite a bit. And every month of the year, even in Iowa, when it's 10 degrees out or 0 degrees out, I'm usually outside, even whether I'm ice fishing or sometimes you gotta break through the ice for the geodes, but we're always out there. And so I've had some interesting experiences, and I've heard and seen tons of different types of wildlife. I've also traveled all around the United States, and I've seen pretty much any kind of megafauna you can see. I've heard them. So last Thursday, my friend and I had planned to go to central Iowa, where we knew there was a certain deposit, a lithic shelf of a certain chert material that occurs, and it occurs there, and then it also occurs in northeast Missouri. So we were going to camp in that general area Thursday night, and then we were going to go down to northeast Missouri on Friday. And we were kind of arrowhead hunting along the Des Moines River as we were making our way to central Iowa. We were going to stay in the just south of Iowa. And I actually had never been over there. I've been to a lot of places in Iowa, and very rural Iowa as well, but I'd never been over by. But so because we were stopping at so many different places along the Des Moines River on our way there, we didn't actually pull into until probably 8:20, 8:30. So it was twilight when we came in, and there's no electricity run through it, so it's just black at night. It's just dark. And as we were driving through the forest, we actually came in. There are a few entrances you can go into this forest. We came in on the south side, and we made our way kind of just due north through this certain tract. And I know there are several campgrounds you can stay in, but we stayed in one that was, I sent you the map of it, but we stayed in one that's kind of like at the north central position in the forest. So when we pulled in, it's twilight and there's a little bit of light left, but that light in the sky when you're in a forest there's not much. You've got 70-foot trees that are just black surrounding you. And in this area in Iowa, it almost looks like the driftless area. There are a lot of really beautiful rolling hills and deep ravines. And when there is woods, when there is forest, it's thick for Iowa at least. A lot of forest and woods in Iowa really are just kind of remnant forest along rivers where farmers never tilled. They have a lot of really deep ravines and kind of gulches almost, and some pretty nice little hills. So when we first rolled into the park, or the forest, I should say, we found the campground that we liked. We hadn't planned it out to where we wanted to stay in that exact campground. We kind of knew we'd play it by ear, and we didn't figure there would be many people, if any, since it was a Thursday night. It was kind of hot, and it was so remote. But so as we drove through the forest, we didn't happen to see any other vehicles or any other campers. And in this specific campsite, there was no one else staying. So I left my vehicle running for the first 10 minutes that we got there to fill out the kind of camping information, the little tag you fill out for your site. And then to set up, we had 2 tents. My friend packed just a 1-person pop-up tent, and I foolishly brought a 6-person tent. I have a 4-person tent as well, but my wife was using that at the state fair. She went and she stayed with her parents there. So we set up the tents. We get the fire going, and it's probably 10 or 15 minutes of us doing that. I shut the car off and the lights off, and it's pretty well dark by now. There's not much of twilight at all left. It's to my recollection too, there was no moon that night, and I never happened to see one. So after we get the fire going, we both took our flashlights, which, again, I usually camp with a mag flashlight that has just like an unbelievable amount of lumens power to it. I sent that with my wife though, so I just have my phone flashlight. We were going around this campsite, which is probably, it's a cleared area that's probably 200 yards long, 150 yards long by 70 or 80 yards wide, and the width certainly varies throughout the campsite. And we were staying in the southeast corner, but so we made our way around with our phone flashlights, and we're just grabbing twigs and branches that had fallen, and we were checking the other fire rings to see if anyone had left any logs when they put their fire out. And actually, most of the fire rings still had grass growing in them, so I don't think people camp at this. Maybe they don't even camp in very much, and maybe there's a reason, but they may just not camp at this particular site very much. So when we were setting up the tent and getting the fire going, I heard a pack of coyotes maybe a half mile out, maybe a quarter mile away from us to the northwest. And I don't know that this really plays into the story, but I'll mention it. We heard them for maybe 10 minutes, and they kind of quieted down. They may have moved off to where I couldn't hear them, or they may have just stopped making their noise. But I was at the northwest corner of this entire campsite, looking in the fire rings and then looking for fallen trees and branches. And probably a quarter mile off, I heard 4 consecutive sounds that I just couldn't place. They were really loud, but they were pretty far off. And I could tell it came from something big, but I just, I kind of went through the Rolodex of animal noises that I know as I heard it, and I couldn't place it. So I met back with my friend at our camping site, and I said, "Hey, did you hear that?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Was that an elk bugling or something?" We don't have elk in Iowa anymore. I think they were hunted out by either the late 1800s or the early 1900s. I've certainly seen elk on farms in the state, but I didn't happen to notice any elk farms near us. And this wasn't really an elk bugling. It wasn't that noise. I was just trying to maybe even get an answer, knowing my friend wouldn't have the answer, but he kind of laughed it off and said, "I don't know what that was, man, but I don't think it's an elk." And we weren't that concerned about it. I didn't think about it. So, we kind of finished grabbing our wood around the site, and we then sat by the fire and got it going a little bit. But I only brought probably enough fire for to keep it going until about 3 or 4 in the morning. And I wanted to kind of be conservative with it too, because I knew it was going to drop down into the 50s that night. And if you've ever camped, when it gets down to the 40s and 50s, it can be miserable, even if you're dressed in layers and everything. So I like to keep the fire going when it gets that cold. So we had kind of a small fire going, but we were sitting around it. He was to my left, my friend, and I started cooking a bratwurst over the fire. The way our site is set up, the specific one we were camping at, it's probably, it's pretty close to the wood line on the southeast corner, and I think we were, maybe 10 or 15 yards away from the tree line. And it's been at this point probably 15, 20 minutes since we heard the coyotes kind of quiet down, and then those initial 4 loud noises that we couldn't place. It's just pitch black at this point. The stars are kind of starting to come out, but again, there's, in a forest that night, when the stars are coming out, you can really only see, a pretty select portion of the sky, just because all of the horizon is drowned out by the trees. So as I'm cooking this bratwurst and, I'm talking with my friend, we hear a sound 150 yards behind us, diagonally to basically the northwest corner of the entire campsite. And it sounded like it came from, an amplifier or a bullhorn or an air horn. It was so unbelievably loud. And I'm sure if anyone does hear this, and even if no one does, and it's just you who hears this, I know there's no way you haven't heard it. So I'll just say, in the Sierra Sounds, the very beginning, and a little bit throughout the recording, there are the sort of howls or the whoops that sound off in the recording, and it's so distinctive. It's such a distinct noise. That's what we heard. And immediately following that, from that same location, as soon as the whoop died down, there was that garbled, that mumbling chatter. Same thing, that you can hear in the Sierra Sounds. And even though I've listened to the Sierra Sounds countless times because it's so unbelievably interesting and mind-boggling to me, and going into this experience, I fully believed in Sasquatch because not only does it make sense, even though to a degree it's hard to wrap your head around, but I've also had experiences which I've reached out to you about recently, but I didn't connect it to that at all, not in the least. As soon as I heard that, every hair on my body stood up just electrically. It was just so unbelievably loud. I've heard elk bugle before. I've heard cows, when the calves are separated from their mothers and you hear them kind of crying out all night. Or I've heard cows injured too, and the unbelievable volume of their moo is that's unbelievably loud in itself. But this just put that to shame. And we had to have been 150 yards away from it. I could pinpoint exactly where this thing came from. It was just so strange. But so even having heard the Sierra sound so many times in my life, I didn't know what this was in the first moment or two. I did the human thing again of sort of going through the Rolodex in my head of, what was that? What biological creature, animal, being makes that sound? And I came up with nothing. And I turned to my friend, and still knowing I wouldn't get an answer, but just, it's also such a human thing to say, what was that, or give me an answer. I turned to him and I just said, what the hell was that? What in God's name made that noise? And his face was so, I've known this guy for years, and I've spent such an amazing amount of time with this guy. He's a super close friend of mine. I've just never seen him this serious, or he had such a grave look on his face, and it was like he knew right away. And he said that had to be Bigfoot. And my first reaction, even as a believer, an experiencer, I still said, there's no way, you're full of it. There's no way. But as soon as he said that, it was like it unlocked, I don't know, this thing in my mind, and I immediately remembered the Sierra sounds then, and I was able to connect that noise to something I'd actually heard before. And I mean, my heart just sank as that sort of set into my head. Just the immediate acceptance almost was terrifying. Because we're in the middle of nowhere. It's just so remote. It's in the middle of nowhere in Iowa. Because even if you leave the forest, there's nothing but agricultural fields around it. Other rolling hills, rivers, agricultural fields. So we were so remote. It's just pitch black. We're surrounded by woods. And I hear this thing that I am realizing is Bigfoot. And even if it's not, this is unbelievably loud noise. Unbelievably loud. But so some of this just happened so quickly after this then. So, I turn to my friend and I ask, what the hell was that? He says it's Bigfoot. It sets into me that this is what this is. And then within seconds, to our right, and probably 50 or 60 feet in front of us into the tree line, I hear tree knocks, and I've never heard that before. I've told you I've had experiences before. I've gone into pretty good detail as to what those experiences were with you, but I've never heard tree knocks before. I've never heard vocalizations like this in person. And the tree knocks came in sequences of two. There were 3 sequences of 2, so it was knock, 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 knock. And it wasn't like I imagined a tree knock would be. I've heard people describe it where it sounds like, someone's taking a Louisville Slugger and just slamming it against a tree. And going back to the Sierra sounds, you hear that sort of ricocheting ping as these tree knocks are occurring in the recordings. This wasn't like that. This was pretty loud, but it was almost like a muffled or a muted knock. I've also heard not just woodpeckers throughout my life, but different species of woodpeckers too. There's such an unbelievable difference between, any kind of a woodpecker. There's this sort of hollow resonance that sounds from their bill as they drill into a tree, and they can do slow these sort of bats or drills into trees as they're going around and pecking into the tree. But I've never heard one keep a measured time in this way, and I've also never heard one that sounded like this. And I've also never heard a woodpecker at night. I'm not claiming that they don't make sounds at night, but I've just never heard one. So as soon as we hear that tree knock, off to our kind of diagonally to our right. I turn to my friend again. I say, "Okay, we got to get out of here, like right now. You know, we can either pack up, or I don't care at this point. We can leave all of our stuff. We got to get out of here, because I know what's happening now. There's a call and a response. So we have two of them, and I maybe generally know where they are, but I can't see them. I don't know what they want. I don't know what they're doing, but we also didn't go into this experience looking for this at all. I listen to Bigfoot podcasts all the time. I read accounts online all the time. I read historical accounts that seem to be related to Bigfoot or Sasquatch all the time. I don't want to experience them anymore. The idea of running into something like this in the woods or even in a controlled setting just doesn't. I don't want that at all. I know some people want that to learn more, or just people who haven't experienced it, and I totally get that. I totally understand that. That's not why we went out to these woods. I didn't know that they would be out there. I wasn't looking for them. So, as my friend and I are having this sort of frantic, I don't know, just trying to come to terms, this conversation of, what do we do? Because even though in my head I knew, hey, we need to leave, it was the strangest thing that we stayed, and I didn't really understand why when I thought about it and when I talked about it. I've told my wife this story probably 4 times now. Maybe the 3rd or 4th time I told her, she said, "It sounds like you guys were experiencing the sort of sensation of being prey. If you imagine a rabbit, they just sit still for so long until the last second, and then maybe they bolt, or maybe that's their last second. Maybe they don't ever move and they get taken by whatever is preying upon them." I don't know. We stayed. I can't really explain it. We stayed in our chairs too during hearing this. I don't know. I just couldn't. I couldn't move. Almost. I could move my body around, but I just couldn't bring myself to stand up. And so we shined our phone flashlights into the tree line in front of us and behind us as well. And I didn't see anything. My friend didn't see anything. As we're shining our lights around us, trying to see anything, diagonally to our left, we hear something moving in the woods, and there's a sort of a subtle ravine that gets pretty. To be honest, I never went and looked at it before any of this happened. While there was still some twilight. Sorry, I'm sitting outside on a gravel road, and every once in a while there might be a car that passes. I never went and looked at this ravine, but I could kind of see when there was still a bit of light left when we had first arrived that it seemed to go down in a pretty drastic sense, down to a pretty deep gulch, diagonally to our left, maybe 100, 200 feet off. That seemed to be where this movement was coming from that we started to hear. And it didn't last long, but you could hear something moving through the woods on 2 feet at a very slow cadence, and it was breaking things as it moved. I don't know if it was breaking branches on trees. I don't know if it was breaking things that had already fallen to the forest floor. I've heard deer move through the woods. Usually you don't really hear them move through the woods, but if they are in a sort of lackadaisical mindset, you can hear them brushing against things. They don't really break things as they move through the woods. This thing, it just sounded massive, and it just, every step that it took, you could hear things just cracking, breaking around it. So this just adds to the intensity of all this and the fear. I've had some pretty wild close calls in my life. I used to be pretty careless and reckless and pretty wild as a younger dude, and I've had some pretty close to near-death experiences. And if I'm being honest, they're probably just near-death experiences, things that happen so fast that you don't really realize until a moment after, or 10 moments after. Jesus, that was pretty close. The adrenaline spike I had immediately during this was just through the roof. So we're sitting around the fire. We now are aware that there's at least possibly 3 things surrounding us, and they seem to be communicating, and they may even be getting closer. We're in a very hushed sense having this conversation of just constantly saying, what do we do? We need to leave. But again, we don't leave. I just can't explain it. And I knew from the start of it that we needed to leave. It's just one of those, I don't know if it was shock or what, but it must have been another 10 or 15 minutes of us just sitting, looking back and forth in the dark around the fire, every once in a while, shining our flashlights in front of us in the woods behind us, and we just don't see anything. Within that 10 or 15 minute window of us, sitting and, I don't know, waiting to see what happened next. We heard a little bit of movement in the woods diagonally to our right, where we heard the tree knocks, and diagonally to the left, where we heard this thing moving up, through this ravine. Not much, and the movements weren't anything dramatic. We didn't hear anything crashing quickly through the woods, nothing vocalizing, nothing like that. But every time we heard something, it was just like a life or death fear, that spiked the adrenaline all over again, or maybe even higher than before. So after this, I'll say a 15-minute window of the initial noise happening behind us 150 yards or so at the northwest corner of this site. I should say also, as we're sitting around the fire, I'm on the right, my friend is on my left. Again, we have the woods 10 or 15 yards in front of us. And my vehicle is parked probably 20 feet behind me, and my tent is set up kind of diagonally to the left behind me. So I could see around my tent into the clearing, but my friend had basically like a perfectly clear view of it. It's dark, but with the flashlight we could see a little bit into the clearing. So 10 or 15 minutes goes by, and we then hear, it wasn't another whoop, but we heard such a loud vocalization that was so fast and so loud that I kind of can't wrap my head around what it was. I guess I should say I can't explain how this noise sounded, but this is now 50 feet behind us to the left, diagonally back to the left. And there's this really big tree that, as I've told the story, I said it looked like a cottonwood, but I never saw it in the daylight, and I didn't take the time to try to really see what it was as all this was happening. But it was this big tree kind of back to our left behind us. And that seemed to be in the moment where this noise came from. So there's this unbelievably loud vocalization. And then it's followed by a sequence of 3 other vocalizations that all happened within such a fast succession that I can't imagine there was even a moment for this thing to take a breath, which tells me the lung capacity on whatever's doing this must be just unbelievable. So we hear this this unbelievably loud vocalization behind us 50 feet back, which then goes to more of that garbled, what people call samurai chatter. And this was kind of on the higher end. It wasn't that low, really bassy, like really guttural chatter. This was really, it was so fast, and there were just so many accents in it, just ba 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 ba. And I say high pitched, even though it was high pitched for what I've heard in the samurai chatter. For a human being, this wasn't high pitched. But as soon as this probably 2.5 second sort of chatter vocalization happens, it then immediately goes out into this just like this just nightmarish yowl. It sounded like what a mountain lion does, that really mad territorial, I'll sound like an idiot doing it, but it just sounds, it's that really low, pissed off, like, get out of here, that territorial, just mean vocalization that they do. But this was, I mean, a mountain lion doesn't have anything on this vocalization. This would have had to be the size of a rhinoceros making, if a mountain lion was 900 pounds or something. It was just so loud. And after that vocalization, there was more chatter that it did. And all of this was continuous. It was basically all one vocalization, but it was those 4 different things happening back to back. But so when we initially heard that loud yell or whatever it was, we both jumped out of our seats because, and it was one of those things where I don't know that I've jumped a million times out of fear in my life, but I don't know that I've ever truly jumped. My body might have, arced before, or I may have been scared up from something, but I jumped out of my seat, truly. And as the following, the sort of successions of vocalizations came after that, it's all within seconds of me turning around into the dark, and my friend who's to my left, and my tent is not impeding upon his view of this thing or whatever it may be. It's what I'm trying to say is I think this thing was using infrasound, because the way my friend has described this to me as we talked it out that entire night and the entire next day, the way he describes it is even louder than I'm telling you now. And I'm sitting here saying it sounded like the biggest mountain lion, 8 times the size of a mountain lion. He thought it was even louder than that. And as we're turning around in the dark, he almost half said the word mountain lion. He didn't even say a full sentence. It was almost like he just said mountain lion, and then he said, "She's coming right for us." And when he said that, I'm looking ahead in the dark where this noise is coming from. I'm sort of turning toward it. I can't see whatever it is. Even with the sort of backlighting of the fire, I'm just looking into this empty space, basically. When he said that, it felt like every one of my innards, my heart down to my intestines, just dropped into my pelvis. It was the most sinking feeling I've ever felt in my life. And as I told my wife the story, one of the times I told her, I realized what that was, and I just broke down crying when I was telling her. It was a subconscious acceptance of, you're going to die in this moment. And before my brain could accept it, my body accepted it. Hearing that vocalization and me assuming what this was, And then hearing my friend saying she's coming right for us, that combination was just the perfect combination of something in my body saying, okay, you're going to die. And, you know, a second later, as she's, by the way, as I'm saying this is something in experiences usually. Sometimes people see, you know, genitalia. They'll see a male and they'll say, oh, that was a male. Or they'll see females. They'll say that was a female. I did get a look at this thing eventually, but it wasn't a good enough look where I can give an amazing description of what I saw by any means. When I'm saying female, it's totally just a sensation. It could have been a male, I don't know, but and my friend who immediately said she's coming right for us, so he immediately felt that it was a female too. So I'll just say that it was a female, but I don't know. We both sort of got our phones out at the same time and turned the flashlights on, and as we did this, the vocalization stops and we see nothing. There's nothing in front of us. You know, we look over at the tree, we're scanning all around with our lights. There's nothing. And it's so mind-boggling. My adrenaline is like non-existent right now. It's so through the roof. I feel like there's just a mountain of adrenaline above me even. I'm just so unbelievably freaked out. And I turn to my friend and I say, we got to get out of here. You know, leave your tent. I don't care about it. I'm leaving my tent. Maybe I'll come back in the morning. I don't care if I ever see it again. We're also now hearing behind us these two things that we are supposing are in the woods that were in front of us, you know, doing the wood knocks and walking through the ravine. We're hearing them move through the woods now. And again, it's not this dramatic crashing through the woods. It's this sure step, as though these things are just, I don't know if they've been through it a million times. And it was like a trained thing. It was like a Navy SEAL tactic, you know. They just were moving in the dark with sure steps, letting us know we're coming in closer. They weren't hiding it, because this thing that vocalized behind us, 50 feet behind us, she snuck all the way either around the tree line or she cut right through the open campsite for 120, 30 yards. And we didn't hear her at all. You know, not at all. The only reason we knew she was there is because she screamed at us. So we're constantly turning around in a 360 now with our lights, trying to see if she's there, trying to see if these two are in the woods. And then I should say too, I really think that there were four, because I think the initial vocalization that we heard, it just sounded so male, and it just sounded so different from the vocalization we heard that was, you know, 50 feet behind us. Again, I can't scientifically say, hey, I know that there were four of these creatures there. It's, you know, with so many of these experiences, it's, you have to just sort of go off of your senses. And that's hard too, because you know, when you have so much adrenaline and it's dark and you're in this fight or flight mindset, your senses are almost unreliable. So as we're spinning around with our flashlights, you know, trying to see these things, not seeing anything, my friend starts breaking his tent down, and I'm yelling at him at this point. You know, I'm like, dude, man, leave your tent. You know, who cares about that? We have to leave now. These things are trying to get us the hell out of here. I'm leaving all my stuff. And my friend is just so bullheaded, though, that he was saying, no, man, I'm not leaving this tent. You know, I paid whatever X amount of money for it. I'm taking it. And he folds his tent up, and he starts doing it to mine too. And I just say, you know, we got to leave this, you know. And it's one of those things again where I didn't just get in my car and say, get in, we're leaving. I don't know. It was like I was letting circumstance just play out, and I was just kind of in the passenger seat, which is terrible in these kind of situations. You know, you as an adult and as a man with testosterone, and, you know, someone who's experienced wild things, and you think that in the moment you'll act and you'll say, oh, I know what I would do, you know, and I'm going to do it right now. I think we should get out of here. I'm getting out of here. But that just was completely out the window. So as he's breaking my tent down, which again is a 6-person, massive, stupid, clunky tent, and the poles always get stuck at the top in the little sleeves that have for the poles. I'm shining my light still on that tree where I assume this vocalization came from. My friend who is breaking the tent down keeps shining his light up. He's shining it at the tent, and then he'll shine it up. He's shining it down at the tent, and he'll shine it up, at the tree line. And all around us, too. At some point, he shines off kind of back toward behind my car while I'm shining my light at that big tree where I think this vocalization has come from. And that's when I saw her. My friend did not see her. I saw her. She was there the whole time, and we didn't see her because she was so unbelievably black. I'm talking about blacker than a shadow, blacker than anything else. I just thought it was part of the night. I thought it was a tree stump. Honestly, I've heard people say that in podcasts so many times, when they're going through their experience, I thought the same was a tree stump. And I believed that when I heard it, but my mind couldn't wrap around how can someone think this, big, bulky, hairy thing, even if it's squatted down, could be a tree stump, but it just, your mind can't in the moment calculate or even accept that something that big is an organic biological thing. I've got another car passing, so I'm going to be quiet for a second. So the only reason I saw her is because she moved. She was on all fours, and on all fours, she was 3.5 or 4 feet tall, which is just, that's that unbelievable thing to think about. That's something that's not a quadruped, something that's not this big, moose or a rhinoceros, as I said earlier, something like that, something that, generally moves around on 2 feet, could be down on all fours and be 4 feet tall. So as I'm shining my flashlight at her, she threw her hands forward from a sort of squatting position with all fours. She threw her hands forward and lunged into the tree line. Now, when she did this, I yelped, basically. I probably sounded like a 12-year-old. This just yelp of fear escaped me. I grabbed my friend's shirt and I said, "Did you see it? Did you see that?" And he said, "No, where?" And I think he thought that it was again coming at us. So he got freaked out again, even more so. But I said, "She just bolted into the tree line." And that's when I sort of just turned into a mode where I said, "I don't care, we're getting out of here," And I took my pocket knife and I just cut the cordage between the tent poles because we couldn't get the goddamn tent poles through the top of the tent. So I just cut it and I pulled it and I just tore the hell out of the top of my tent. And even looking back, I don't care at all. I just don't care. But I have to say, when this thing moved, it was faster than anything I've ever seen. And again, when I hear that in experiences, my mind always goes to speed. But I now know when people are talking about these things moving faster than anyone could imagine, they're not just talking about speed, they're talking about agility. This massive, massive thing, as she lunged forward, she moved faster than any Olympic athlete I've ever seen do any attempt at any sport. Faster than any kind of wildcat pouncing or running after its prey. More agile than anything I've ever seen in my life. it was like a flash. And I don't mean just that she was gone in a flash, but she just took off in a flash. It just moved like nothing I've ever seen before. And the unbelievable thing about it was not just the speed, but I did not hear her land. I didn't hear her land in the woods at all. She bolted, with her hands forward. And if that happens, if an object moves forward, it stops moving. She had to land, but I didn't hear a leaf, nothing. And these things are still moving behind us in the woods. So that was finally just seeing her and seeing her do that. That was finally when, the thing clicked over in my head and it just said, okay, here's your answer. Time to leave. And I cut the cordage on the tent poles. We pulled them through everything in the back of my vehicle. And, I sped out of there so fast that I almost went in the ditch twice, just leaving the forest. And as that happened, again, the adrenaline just skyrocketed, thinking if you go into the ditch here, you're done. You're not walking out of here. And I don't have a vehicle with 4-wheel drive, so I'm not getting out of there. So I keep it on the road and, we get it out of there, and that's the experience in a sense. But what a lot of people don't get to talk about, I don't think, is the immediate after, the moments, the minutes and the hours after the experience. We're 2.5 hours away from my house in central Iowa. Immediately I drove up and just to be in some sort of town. But it's like 10:08, I think. Because I remember I called my wife immediately as we're leaving the park and barely explained it. And I just said, hey, I just had this terrible experience. And I said, please don't laugh at me. Like, please, dear God, don't laugh at me. Because she knows how close I am to the subject, and I've even told her about some of the experiences that I've had. I shouldn't say experiences, though I've had so many, but I had, a pretty affecting experience when I was a kid. And I told her about that, and she, I don't know, I think I just wanted to be taken seriously immediately because I was still so close to it. So I called her, and it was only a 2-minute conversation. She said, no, I'm sorry, I'm sorry that happened. And are you okay? And I believe you, and I said, yeah, I'm fine. And I just had to tell somebody, and, but we're going to figure this out, and so my friend and I drive into Lucas, which is 3-4 minutes away. And, the whole town's asleep by 10. There's hardly any lights on at all in the town. The street lights are also just kind of pitiful there. It's just so dark that I kind of think, as we're driving through the town, I think no wonder these things, can exist here. There's just there's nothing going on, and so then my friend and I drive around for a while, and we were just saying, what do we do? I'm not going to go get a hotel or something, and I'm not going to camp somewhere else. My friend was kind of saying we should go camp down at a lake a little east of where we were at. And I just said, no way, man. There's no way I'm camping tonight. And we basically got into a pretty sweet argument over it. And I love this dude, and I just went through something insane with him, but we just weren't thinking right, but I wound up driving 2.5 hours back to my place, and we didn't get in the door until 2:20 at night. And I was just dead tired after that from all these adrenaline spikes, because the adrenaline spike doesn't go down. It didn't go down in the car until we'd been driving for an hour and a half, because we're just trying to make sense of this thing. And I realized in the car too at some point, I think pretty quickly, that I was so unbelievably thankful that I had someone there with me. For one, because I don't think these things would have come into our sight or done what they did had there been other campers there. I think it was all perfect in that we showed up basically at night. I had the car running for a little while. I had the lights on. we're walking around the campsite then with our flashlights and stuff. And I think these things just said, hey, what's this? We better check this out. If we had gone there and set up our tents during the day, that might not have happened, because they may have taken their looks or their peeks from the woods during the day and said, it's just these two guys camping. Well, who cares? And who knows? Maybe they would have moved on. Maybe they don't want people there. I have no idea. But I was so thankful that I had somebody with me, because I felt not safer, but I felt like maybe it didn't escalate any further because there were two of us, and because we got out of there when we did, but also because no matter what, no matter how many times I tell this story in my life, and it doesn't matter who I'm telling it to, whether I'm telling it to the host of a podcast, that's specifically about Bigfoot, whether I tell it to my best friend, my brothers, my mother and father, my wife, my kids, whatever, no one can fully believe me to just the nth degree, 100%. And they also, I can't deliver over the noises that we heard, the fear that I felt, the thing that I saw. I even if I tell the story perfectly, I can't deliver that over, because no one else was there to experience it except for my friend. And so I, at least in my life, have someone who was there, and he knows exactly what happened. And even though we're both still, our minds are just blown as to what did happen, he at least was there and he experienced it with me. And sometimes when I hear people who have these experiences that are like mine, or even much worse, more violent, more terrifying than mine, and they're all alone and they don't have anyone else, even other experiencers, they don't have anyone else who experienced that exact thing with them, I think that is absolutely tragic. And I just feel so fortunate that even though that happened, I had my friend there with me. I had someone who experienced it with me. And I don't know, I think that at least is some kind of, I can take some kind of solace from that, And, so that's really the account, the experience as it happened.
Red, thank you for sharing that. That is incredible. That's probably the most incredible Iowa account I've ever heard in 5 years. That's wild, dude. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions that I wrote down?
No, not at all, man. I'm here, so I'm fine with anything.
These might seem really random, but so what time exactly do you think you were cooking the bratwurst?
I know that it was past 9. It was probably so the window really is let's say, I imagine we got there at 8:30 and we bolted out of there just after 10. So we're there for an hour and 40 minutes, let's say. I bet it was like 9 o'clock or maybe 9:30. It's because these, I know those are the parameters of when we got in and when we left. I know because I looked at my clock on my vehicle when we pulled in, and I think it was like 8:20 something, 8:28, something like that. And then I know when we left, just because I looked at my phone to call my wife. But as I'm talking about these sort of intervals of time, I think just because my adrenaline has spiked the whole time too, they may have been shorter, they may have been longer in between certain things happening. But it's almost hard for me to wrap my mind around, like, were we really sitting there for 30 minutes after the initial sound? Were we sitting there for 25 minutes? Because that's almost more unbelievable, for us to sit there that long through that. But so I bet I was cooking it. Yeah, I know I was cooking it after 9 at least, but it may have been 9:30.
Was there any other food involved?
No, I had some other food, but I wasn't cooking anything, and nothing pungent. Really, when I camp, I don't bring anything too eccentric. I think I had some apples, some canned food, and like a couple broths.
And just like regular type bratwurst, nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah, nothing out of the ordinary. I think they were those lighter colored, like kind of terribly gray broths that,
And it sounded like there wasn't anything recorded, no audio recorded, anything like that, just because it happened so quick and emotions were high.
Yeah, and actually that I didn't know who I would tell about this. I knew I had to tell people just because I had such an anxiety in me the next couple of days after this that I'm constantly trying to quit smoking, and I've quit for intervals of 2 years, 3 years, but I just always go back to it. And I had been in kind of an interval of not smoking, but now I smoked 2 packs in 2 days. I was so stressed out, and as I'm trying to find, like, I'm actually scrolling through my own saying, I can tell about this. But I wound up telling my parents, and, I love my parents, and I told them some wild stuff, but I don't know. I didn't imagine I'd ever tell them. But as I told my mom, she said, did you record it? And I didn't think about that until, I must have seen her Saturday, and this happened Thursday night. So I didn't think about that until Saturday. And she asked me, and I just said, no, like not a second, no photos, no recording, nothing, and I just never, even in the interval of me looking at my friend for whatever, 15, 20, 30 minutes, saying, we need to leave. What do we do? I never was like, hey, we should record this. And again, I'm someone who's been interested in this my entire life, basically.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's a thing where, if you never know how you're going to act until you're in the situation, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. So it sounded like you did not see the face of the creature then.
No, not. And so when I saw her, I didn't realize, again, that I was even looking at her until she moved. But so I didn't even, as she moved her hands out and dove forward, I didn't even hardly make out fingers. It happened so fast, and it was just so dark and so black. I could tell, I could see arms extend, and then I could see the sort of shape of the butt and the legs hunkered down and her torso and everything. But then it just, as she took off, I didn't see any features at all on her face.
Did you get and this is tricky, did you get a sense for how tall the creature was? It sounds like it was just lunging. You saw it on all fours and then it lunged forward.
Yeah, and I'd be totally making something up or lying if I said I think she was 8 feet tall, or I think, because I just don't know. I do know that she had to have been 3.5 or 4 feet tall, and I didn't go back and measure, nothing like that. But I worked in construction for years, my whole teenage and adult life, and I know measurements, and she was 3.5 or 4 feet tall. And when she lunged, when something throws their hands forward and jumps, they're going to be long anyway. Because I've seen a wildcat, a mountain lion, in person before, and it was running next to a vehicle that I was in out in this cornfield, and it was amazing. From maybe 400 yards away, I thought it was a fawn, and then as we got closer and I saw it was a mountain lion, the guy driving wanted to get as close as he could to it, and as this thing was running, the vertices that it was reaching was amazing. It was like a horizon. It was like a perfect flat line with its legs thrown out and its back legs and its tail behind it. So even, a mountain lion is not even a portion the size of what this thing was, but no matter what, if you're lunging like that, you're going to look long. But she looked long, and I wish I could have seen her stand up just to be able to truly gauge the height and the size, but I didn't get a look at that at all.
So the campground sounds very interesting. You said it's about 200 feet long. It was cleared out. Were there any buildings or anything around the area?
Yeah, and so it was probably like 200 yards long, and it may have been longer, because really when we showed up, I didn't take like a mental, like, oh, okay, this the campsite is 200 yards long. I just as that sound occurred, and the initial whoop, that was, I would say, 150 yards behind us, that being at the northwest corner of the campsite, it could have been further, but I would say the campsite was about 200 yards long. Surprisingly, there actually was a stone, like a brick and mortar bathroom really close to our site. I didn't happen to use it, but there was that building. There also were some houses sort of skirting in and out of the sort of outskirts of the state forest, which, when we left, I just thought, man, someday I might have to go knock on some doors and say, how are you living here? Because I know you're getting bothered at night. I just can't imagine living at that place.
The brick and mortar building, what corner of the campsite was that on?
Or that was an hour, so in the southeast corner.
The southeast corner? Okay, so you were you're experiencing everything on the opposite side of the campsite then?
Yeah, so that initial call came, and actually, if I can kind of correspond with you with like over a map at some point, but there's a really big pond actually down to the west of that northwest corner, and I'm just guessing, but this thing that vocalized initially, I would assume came up maybe from that pond. But so that was all from the northwest corner coming down to us, and then in the southeast corner, diagonally to our right in the woods, this thing knocking was in the southeast corner, and then also this thing coming up in the ravine a little bit diagonally to our left. I should say too, so this is just because I'm thinking about it and I've thought about it so many times now. I think everyone who listens to the Sierra Sounds or has had their own experiences, even if it's just hearing whoops or howls or tree knocking in the woods, people are always wondering, obviously, what form of communication is that? What are they trying to communicate? And I don't know, even after having experience, I really don't know. But it's so the initial sounds that we heard when we were gathering firewood, and I asked my friend, was that an elk? I now know that had to have been this initial thing that, made the noise then 150 yards from us. But so I think what they were doing, I think that one was privy to us coming in to the forest. And I think what it was doing was it was centralizing its location to other Bigfoot or Sasquatch in the forest and saying, and maybe it was saying, hey, this is where I'm at, come to me. Maybe just with that noise, they know, oh, maybe we should go there's something going on. And then, because as it vocalized again, 150 yards behind us, and then we got that tree knock within seconds, it was almost like maybe that was a response to say, hey, we're here, and I don't know if it was saying, I've got eyes on it and there are two of them, or if it was saying there are two of us. Maybe it has nothing to do with numbers. I have no idea, but that was something I thought about after, in the sort of following days when I've been thinking about this, maybe that's an answer as to what that is. And I don't know. I'm just totally theorizing.
I did track down some departments over at wildlife biologists prior to our call. I talked to each of the phone numbers on the website just to see if I could get anyone on the phone. And I asked them a question sort of like, were there any reports of large creatures, bears last week or this week? And they said, nope, not in a long time. So I wanted to kind of like take that out of the picture. But wow, this is incredible. Did you, so you packed up everything and you didn't leave anything, did you?
No. And I really don't camp with much either. I think I left the bag, the casing of my chair. I think it's a navy blue Guidesman chair, and I don't think it has that logo on the bag. It's just a navy blue bag, but or like the sleeve bag for camping chairs. I think I left that. And again, farewell. I don't care about it at all. But everything else, I had a really small cooler, my chair, and my tent, really, and that's all I had. and my friend really just had his chair and his little tent, and we managed to get it all, even though I would have been just fine leaving it.
Is there any chance your friend would talk to me?
I think so, and again, I don't know that he would want to go on maybe doing it as like a public kind of thing. He may be open to it. I don't know.
I'm definitely not asking him to either. Pretty much for my records.
Yeah. I will absolutely reach out to him and put you guys in touch. And I really do think that he would be open to talking about it, because he also, just to make this even more of a statistical anomaly, believed wholeheartedly going into this. It just makes it so much stranger to have two people who believe and who aren't going looking for this, for it to happen to them in central Iowa. I think he'd be open to it, because he actually that night, he's really responsible about, we've found some rare species of snakes before. And he reported that to the DNR. He's seen when someone has done kind of like a mass dump of littering in a park. He said, "I'm calling the DNR." He's very open to, like, when things are sort of awry naturally, he's fine with reaching out to the DNR. But we were talking about that night. He said, I feel like I have to call the DNR. What if this rips somebody apart? And I said, let's just think about that, though, because I don't know if I necessarily want to get tangled up with having my name involved with. I haven't heard first person, but I've certainly heard over accounts, some, reading online and just hearing people on podcasts where, they've kind of run into some intimidation stuff, and they report this kind of stuff to agencies, not to people really necessarily interested. Yeah. And I don't know if that would be the case, but I kind of said, let's think about it before we do that, but if I'm not rambling, if I can say too, I'm thinking about this because I'm mentioning what he said. As we were talking about it that night, I said, can you imagine if this happened to someone who didn't know, who didn't go into the experience knowing what those noises were or could be, didn't know what to do? What if it was to a group of guys who'd been drinking, or a mother with her children, or a family with children there? But I just imagined, these things whooping in the night or calling out, and young men being, pissed drunk or something, making noises back at them or yelling back at them. And I just can't imagine that would go over well at all. This thing, when it yowled at us with that just anger of just like the deepest, it was just the meanest thing I've ever heard. If that was any other predator that we know about, not just in North America, but in the entire world, if that was any other predator, and I'll say, like, even in America, if that was a mountain lion, a coyote, a wolf, a bear, a raccoon, that thing would not have stopped vocalizing. It would have kept growling, and it would have escalated, and it would have come toward us. Even if it didn't attack us, it would have pushed us out or come to try to just get a bite. They would have just been in this rage. There's absolutely no way that any other predator would have just been complacent with, okay, they're leaving. That's just not how that type of mind works. This thing, they even if they didn't plan it for it to happen exactly this way, they have tactics. They thought ahead. They at least planned ahead, even if it didn't go according to their plan. Seems like it did, but if they had it their way completely, I never would have seen her either. I never would have gotten a sight on her. None of them exposed themselves besides her. All we heard were the vocalizations. Didn't see them besides her. My friend didn't even see her, and I saw her for a flash. It's these things don't want to be seen, and they were pretty successful, at least at it.
Few last questions. Were you under the influence of anything at all that day?
No, not anything.
And that can be anything at all. Drink, anything.
No, yeah, no.
Okay.
To be honest, I haven't had a drink since 2018.
Perfect. Yeah, awesome.
I might imbibe in other things at times, but I wasn't that day at all. So
okay, perfect. What are the main things that make you think that it was not a mountain lion?
I know that a mountain lion doesn't whoop or howl. They don't mumble in a way that sounds like human language. Sometimes, I've heard vocalizations online where they, especially with their screams, you can say, man, that sounds like a dying woman, or that sounds like a witch. Some people say that. But this thing did match so similarly, at least you could have basically taken clips of the Sierra sounds out, and it didn't sound exactly like them, but it fit within the exact same genre. So let's say those weren't Bigfoot or Sasquatch and the Sierra sounds, whatever those were, that's what was pushing us out of that site. I also, mountain lions don't knock on trees. To my knowledge, I've never heard of any that hunt in packs. This, again, if it was a mountain lion and it was yowling like that at us, even if it didn't attack us and didn't come right for us, we would have seen it. It would have made itself seen, because one of the things with big predators is they say, I'm going to make myself look as big and mean as possible. I don't want this prey or this other predator to just hear me. They're going to see me. Mountain lions do this thing where they put their ears back and they arch their back real big, and or they puff their chest out and they get that snarl on their face and they show all their teeth. They're very showy in those moments. This thing wasn't doing that.
That's wild, man. That is. Lastly, the rock, you said it was like a rock bathhouse. What geographically, if you can use north, south, whatever, what corner of the campsite was that bathhouse on?
That was super close to us. It was just a bathroom, a male female bathroom.
Yeah.
And it was just in the southeast corner there. We stayed on lot 3. And it was just right there by us.
Okay. So your campsite was the closest one to that rock bathhouse thing.
Yeah. It's not like it had masoned stone on the outside. It was like a cinder block.
Sure.
Bathroom.
Yeah. I got it. Okay. I think those are the main questions. If you could, and I'm not a guy that pushes, but if you could reach out to your friend and start that tonight after this call, that would be much appreciated. I need to talk to him as quickly as possible while it is still fresh in his mind.
Absolutely.
So
I'll call him as soon as we wrap up, and because I know, at least, even if he doesn't go through like a super long thing with you and give you whatever, spend 40 minutes, an hour, whatever, I know he would at least talk to you, and I know he'd most likely talk to you on the phone too. I bet he would go through things with you.
Absolutely. That would be great. Red, thank you so much for reaching out again. It's definitely another interesting account for Iowa. And if you think of any more details, definitely feel free to send them my way. But thank you so much, man.
If you got to go, I promise I'm not going to keep you much longer. But I do have a question for you, man, because I always wonder, the people who host these shows, and they hear all the accounts, and they hear so many things that, the listeners don't hear. And I know you've had some accounts too. And the thing that everyone always wonders is, I wonder if you have a beat on what you think Sasquatch is.
So it's tricky for me because I've not actually heard or seen it. But I would, from things I've heard and gathered from witnesses, I would think we are dealing with an undiscovered great ape, but I'm also curious, like, how you're categorizing it in your mind as well, because you did see it for a bit. Is it like more of a a relative of us, or some great ape in Iowa, or is that something where you're still working through yourself, you know?
Yeah, I feel like even if someone had a body, we could obviously study it, and believe me, I'm sure they've been studied.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it is so hard to get a true answer, you know. I don't mean from someone, I just mean from the thing itself, you know.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I have my theories too, you know. I don't know, you know, even from the experiences I've had, but I don't know, you know, there's so many different species in the fossil record that could have become this. You know, there are so many species that never made it or will make it to the fossil record. This could be something that, in a, you know, historic sense, or I guess I shouldn't say historic, more of a, you know, a lithic and biologic sense. We just might not be aware of what it ever was and has become. You know, there's, you know, they seem to have these longer limbs, you know, than us. These really long arms, kind of like if you study like the skeletal systems of Australopithecines, usually have kind of longer arms and just sort of shorter legs. And, you know, Australopithecines were pretty damn small. You know, they were very short and didn't walk around with a lot of weight to them. But, you know, Australopithecines lived 4 million to 1 million years ago that we know of. So that's a long time to change, you know, from then to now. And, you know, they became so many things too. You know, Paranthropus also wasn't that big, but sometimes people throw that around, and that lived, I think, also 3 to 1 million years ago. And I don't think they found any of their fossil records outside of Africa, to my knowledge, but who knows? You know, I mean, when people talk about Gigantopithecus and Beringia, you know, to my knowledge, the last Gigantopithecus we know of existed 200,000 years ago. I think they have done some analysis on one of the teeth that they found, and I think there's like maybe an allowance to where it may have existed 100,000 years ago, and that's just from fossil record. I don't think that's just completely black and white by any means, but there were so many glacial occurrences during the Pleistocene, you know, which existed for 2.5 million years, that epoch. There were 16 or 17 glacial episodes, to my knowledge. So Beringia could have been exposed over a dozen times. You know, that gives, you know, ample time for different things to come over. I mean, there were bipedal apes, in a sense, hominids in Southeast Europe 7 million years ago. You know, Grecopithecus was really that was to what we know. You know, that shared ancestry with the Homo genus, but not with chimps. So in a sense, Grecopithecus is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, original human representations, at least in the human lineage, since the human and chimpanzee split them. And that existed in Europe, you know, 7 million years ago. So I just don't think people want to maybe accept, or at least hear the diversity of you know, hominin and hominid species that have existed over the last, you know, 7-8 million years. So who knows, you know?
It's wild. That's wild.
It is. It's wild, man. It gets wilder than that too, but I feel like I'm keeping you, so I don't want to keep going into it, but maybe another time we'll go through different theories or something.
The cool thing, Red, is it's not just this one thing that you've had happen to you. You got some cool things that have come to you. But Red, thank you so much for hanging out. Just if you'd be able to try to reach out to your friend tonight, that would be much appreciated, so that things could just start rolling. That would be great.
I'll call him right now.
All right.
And would you rather me connect you, guy? He's on Instagram. I can connect you over Instagram. I could give him your number if you're comfortable with that. I don't know if you give that out very much.
Just give him my number.
You tell me and I'll do it.
Yep.
We'll do.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect, man. And I think just, we, I don't know, you being an Iowa guy and being so open and, such a great platform for so many people to just be able to talk about this. I think that'll go a long way with them. So
fantastic. Thanks so much, Red. It was great chatting with you. We'll be in touch, okay?
Yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Here at Bigfoot Society, our goal is to provide a platform for those that have encountered Bigfoot to share their encounter in a safe and respected environment. But we need to hear your story. If you've experienced something that you just can't explain, please send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Then we can start the conversation. And I know a lot of you have not shared your encounter at all. It's been 20 years, and it's time that you get this off your chest, and then you can get some well-deserved rest, because I know you haven't been sleeping. I understand what you're going through, and I appreciate every one of you listening.